22 miles of cold, restless water. That is all that separates England from France. For most of history, that narrow stretch of the English Channel has been enough to keep them apart. A moat protecting an island nation, a barrier that armies could not cross and engineers could not conquer. For 200 years, they dreamed of building a bridge. The first serious proposal came in 1802, horses pulling carriages through a tunnel lit by oil lamps, a vision of underground travel that belonged more to fantasy than engineering. In 1880, they actually started digging. Workers sank shafts into the chalk cliffs of Dover and began carving a test tunnel. But the British government, fearing invasion, ordered them to stop. The sea, it seemed, would always win. 4 times they tried, 4 times they failed. Each abandoned attempt left behind fragments of tunnel, buried dreams in the white chalk. Then in the 1980s, something changed. The British and French governments finally agreed that the time had come. They would not build a bridge, they would not build a single tunnel, they would build 3. 2 rail tunnels, one for trains traveling in each direction, and between them a central service tunnel, a lifeline for maintenance, ventilation, and emergency escape. Together, these 3 bores would fuse 2 economies, 2 nations, and 2 centuries of ambition into a single steel and concrete spine beneath the seabed. On the French side, the village of Sangatte became ground zero. On the English side, they dug from the legendary White Cliffs of Dover. The plan was audacious, the risks were immense, and the first challenge was not money or politics, it was rock. The geology of the English Channel is a layered cake of disaster. Too high, and the tunnel would hit porous rock filled with water, guaranteed flooding that would drown the workers and the machines. Too low, and they would encounter gault clay, a sticky, swelling material that would seize the tunnel boring machines and never let go. The sweet spot was a layer of chalk marl, hard enough to hold a tunnel, but watertight enough to keep the sea out. It was only 20 meters thick, 75 meters beneath the seabed, a target the width of a suburban street buried under a mountain of water and rock. For years, survey ships crisscrossed the channel, drilling core samples from the seabed. Geologists analyzed every fragment of rock, mapping the hidden contours of the chalk marl. When they finally narrowed down the route, the margin for error was measured in meters. Drift a few feet too high, and the sea would pour in. Drift a few feet too low, and the clay would swallow them whole. On both sides of the channel, construction began with explosions. The British faced a vertical wall of white chalk, the famous cliffs of Dover. They needed a flat base to launch their tunnel boring machines, but the cliff offered nothing but a sheer drop. So they blasted away 250,000 cubic meters of rock, carving a massive notch into the face of the cliff. A new piece of Britain was made from chalk dust and dynamite. The French faced a different problem. The coast near Sangatte was flat, but the chalk marl layer was deeper here. They dug a vast circular pit, 60 meters deep, sinking an artificial shaft into the earth. From the bottom of this pit, their tunnel boring machines would launch underground, already closer to the target layer. The tunnel boring machines themselves were not bought off the shelf. They were manufactured specifically for this project, 11 machines in total, each one a self-contained subterranean factory. The cutter head alone weighed 600 tons. Imagine a Ferris wheel made of steel teeth, designed to grind through solid rock at a rate of meters per day. These machines did not just dig, they built as they went. Hydraulic arms lifted precast concrete segments into place, sealing them against the rock to form a watertight ring. Those seals were all that stood between the workers and the ocean. Every seal had to be perfect. The British machines were open-face excavators designed for the relatively dry chalk marl. They launched 6 machines in total, 3 for the land tunnels leading to the coast, 3 for the undersea crossing. The French machines were different. The chalk on their side was wetter, looser, less stable. Their machines were sealed-face excavators, using pressure to hold back the water while they dug. Inside those unventilated tunnels, temperatures could reach 50 degrees Celsius. Workers stripped down to shorts, sweating in the artificial hell miles from the sun. The French side was a pressure cooker, not just from the heat, but from the water pressing against the tunnel walls, held back only by the machines and the skill of the crews. The service tunnel took the lead. It was smaller than the main rail tunnels, faster to excavate, and it served as the Pathfinder for the entire project. Every meter was a gamble. The crews were constantly looking for water seepage, the earliest warning of trouble. A damp spot on the wall, a trickle seeping through a joint. Every leak had to be found and injected with grout immediately. If a leak grew while the crews slept, it could be a flood, trapping the tunnel boring machines and drowning the workers inside. The pressure was crushing. Not just the weight of the sea, but the weight of the schedule, the cost, the expectations of two nations watching from above. To stay inside the 20-meter chalk Marl layer, the machines needed absolute precision. A beam of light projected from the tunnel entrance kept them on course, but light bends over distance. The primary guide was a gyroscope, an electronic compass that knew every twist and turn of the planned route. The operator steered the 1,000-ton machine like a car, making micro-adjustments to keep the cutterhead inside the Goldilocks layer.
The logistics were monstrous. The tunnel boring machines chewed through solid rock, producing a constant flow of spoil, crushed chalk and marl that had to be removed from the tunnel. In total, they excavated 7.5 million cubic meters of material. The British spoil was loaded onto barges and dumped into the sea, forming a new 90-acre coastal platform. They had literally pushed the English Channel back, creating land where there had been only water. The main rail tunnels followed the Pathfinder service tunnel. They were larger, faster, and carried more risk. The rail tunnels had to be perfect, smooth enough for high-speed trains, strong enough to withstand the pressure of the sea for 100 years. The track was specially designed to handle the heat and vibration, welded into continuous ribbons of steel that would carry passengers at 100 miles per hour under the seabed. After 39 kilometers of drilling, the service tunnel faces were only meters apart. Two separate worlds, British workers and French workers, each drilling blindly toward a common point, relying on the gyroscope and the surveyor's calculations. Any error in the alignment and they would miss each other completely, passing like ships in the dark, 75 meters beneath the channel. The final moment of truth arrived on December 1st, 1990. The British team drilled the pilot hole. The drill bit broke through the last centimeters of rock and emerged into empty space. On the other side, a French worker saw the tip of the drill appear through the chalk dust. The faces had met. The alignment error was less than half a meter. 39 kilometers apart, 75 meters down. That is not precision. That is impossible. The handshake between the British miner and the French miner was broadcast around the world. 200 years of dreaming, 4 failed attempts, and now, at last, the link was made. The chalk marl had held, the sea had been kept at bay, the risk had paid off. The main rail tunnels followed, meeting over the next few months. But what happened to the tunnel boring machines was perhaps the strangest chapter of all. The British machines were too big to turn around. The tunnels were not wide enough for them to pass each other. Rather than waste months dismantling them, the engineers made a cold calculation: seal them in place. 6 massive British tunnel boring machines, each weighing over 1,000 tons, were buried forever beneath the English Channel. They became part of the tunnel, a monument to the engineering logic that valued time over hardware. The French machines, smaller and more maneuverable, were dismantled piece by piece and brought back to the surface. Some were scrapped, others found new lives on different projects. But the British machines remained down there, entombed in the chalk, their cutter heads frozen in mid-bite for eternity. With the tunnels complete, the focus shifted to making them safe. Giant fans push fresh air through the entire length of the system, cycling the air every few seconds. Without ventilation, the tunnels would become unbreathable, filled with diesel fumes, heat, and the carbon dioxide of trapped passengers. Power and signal cables line the walls, carrying 25,000 volts of electricity to the trains. Touching that line is a permanent mistake. Fire was the greatest fear. A fire inside a train under the sea. No quick exit, no fresh air, no easy rescue. Every 375 meters, an escape route connects the rail tunnels to the central service tunnel. The service tunnel is the lifeline. A complete fire suppression system lines every meter of both rail tunnels, ready to douse flames with foam and water. Emergency lighting is redundant and powerful, capable of guiding evacuees through thick smoke. The first train ran in 1994, but the project was already in chaos. The cost had ballooned from an estimated $4.7 billion to nearly $10 billion. The engineering was a miracle. The finances were a disaster. The companies that built the tunnel nearly went bankrupt. It would take years for the project to become profitable, if it ever did. The terminals at Folkestone and Coquelles were finally completed. They built a massive logistics hub, a city for cars, where passengers drive their vehicles onto special shuttles that carry them through the tunnel. 40 minutes from coast to coast, riding on a custom-designed ferry on wheels, a high-speed underground cruise. The political dream was ready to be realized. The cost in human lives, 11 workers in total killed in accidents during construction, was tragically real. Their names are recorded on memorials on both sides of the channel. They did not live to see what they helped build. 2 years after opening, the ultimate fear became reality. A fire broke out inside a truck shuttle, fueled by tires and cargo. Flames spread, smoke filled the tunnel. The fire suppression systems activated immediately. The service tunnel became a sanctuary. Evacuation doors opened, passengers moved through the escape routes, and every single life aboard the truck shuttle was saved. The safety system had passed its test. Under the worst possible conditions, the three-tunnel design proved itself. The fire burned for hours, damaging the tunnel, but no one died. The engineering had held. With the completion of High Speed 1, the dedicated high-speed rail line from the tunnel to London, travel time from London to Paris was finally cut to just over 2 hours, faster than flying, without the security lines or the airport stress. The seamless crossing of the English Channel, made possible by a century of dreaming and a decade of digging. The physical link is permanent, an unbreakable bond of steel and chalk buried 75 meters beneath the sea. It remains one of the greatest collaborative engineering feats in human history. They said the sea was a wall. The Channel Tunnel proved that human ingenuity can conquer natural barriers. Today, millions of passengers cross through it every year. Trains streak through the darkness, carrying tourists and commuters, goods and dreams. And somewhere beneath their wheels, buried in the chalk, 6 massive tunnel boring machines rest in eternal silence, the forgotten giants that made it all possible. The next impossible challenge is already underway, but that is a story for another day. If you want to understand more about the engineering marvels that connect our world, the tunnels, the bridges, the pipelines, and the railways that make the impossible possible, subscribe to Quit Tech Process. We explore the projects that define human ambition. Hit subscribe and join us for the next journey.